Hey everyone, we'll just start our panel discussion now. My name is Caroline. I'm one of this year's event coordinators for Young Transport Professionals. So thank you for joining us today on our topic of starting the decade of action on road safety. I'm very excited to be hosting this event in collaboration with the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety. And just a quick thank you to our panelists, Rob, Wayne, Alex, Grace, and our facilitator, Mal, for joining us today. So I'll just move on to our agenda for today. So we'll go through the acknowledgement of traditional landowners and then hear a bit about YTP, and then go through the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety and introduction to our discussion topic. Then we'll introduce our panelists and our opening questions and move on to our Q&A segment and final question. Feel free to drop questions within our Q&A panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll hopefully go through them all throughout the night. So the Young Transport Professionals and Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which this event is taking place, pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. So a bit about YTP, for anyone that's new. We are a not-for-profit organisation that's run by a voluntary committee. Our aim is to connect the next generation of young transport leaders, and we do this through hosting and organising site events, forums, and social events for our members. We obviously can't do all this without our industry partners, the Department of Transport, Metro Trains Melbourne, and AGM. So I'll now pass on to Grace, who is one of our panelists for this evening, as well as a member of the Youth Advisory Board for the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety. And she will introduce our topic and give you further information on the coalition. So thank you, Grace. Sorry, Grace, I think you're mute.
Sorry everyone, I'm awful with technology. Hi, my name is Grace. Hopefully my presentation is showing. We good with that, Caroline?
No, I can't see it on my end.
Not showing?
No, I might have, when I sent you through, your screen must have come off.
Just bear with us one moment, guys. Sorry, technical difficulties.
Hold on. Okay.
I can see it here, Grace, as well.
Yeah, it's working now.
Great. All right. Hopefully you can all see that. I'll give you a quick introduction to myself. My name is Grace Willems. I work for the RACQ, which is a Queensland's peak automobile association, but I'm also the Australian member on the Youth Advisory Board for the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety. Now, the coalition, you can see a photo of many of us here on the first slide of the presentation, but what we are is basically a passionate group of young leaders around the world who are committed to helping realise the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal of halving road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. And this picture that you're looking at now was actually taken in February, just prior to COVID getting really bad, when we were all able to meet up in Sweden at the Second World Youth Assembly for Road Safety, which was an official pre-event for the third Global Ministerial Road Safety Conference. So just before we get started, I'd just like to do a little bit of a pop quiz. If I can get my slide to change. So if you could all just bear with me, I'll be one of those people and ask you to head over to www.menti.com and type in that code there, 4111711. You can also use the QR code on the screen. Thanks to COVID, we're all, I'm sure, used to using that. So I'll leave that on the screen for a couple of seconds while everyone heads over. But essentially, we'll just be running through one or two quick road safety related questions just to get people into kind of the spirit of what we're trying to achieve today and see basically where your baseline knowledge is on road safety and how you feel about it. So hopefully everyone's in now, and I'll just bring up our first question here, which I can see people are already starting to respond to. So our question is riding a horse with a blood alcohol level of greater than 0.05 illegal? yes, or only if the horse is drinking. I can see more results coming in now. No, oh, we've got one no, we've got one only if the horse is drinking. The yes is starting to win. We'll give it like 10 more seconds just to see where the majority is sitting. Got another no coming in. Yep, okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry if everyone hasn't responded yet, but just to try and keep you all getting out of here on time. But we can see here, obviously, that so far it looks like the yeses are winning, and that is absolutely correct. Whether you're riding a horse or you're on a bike, a fun fact about road safety is if you're over that legal limit, it's still classified as, unfortunately, illegal driving. So also I would advise do not feed horses alcohol. That's probably not very good for them, but it is a bit of a fun fact. We can see here that there are a fair few people who wouldn't actually consider it to be drink driving, but it is in fact across all the states in Australia, I believe. So that was a bit of a fun one to start with, a bit of a fun fact about road safety and laws, but we'll just move on to a little bit of one that's probably not so fun, unfortunately. And I would just like those in the chat to basically indicate if any of you have ever had a friend or a loved one or even someone you know in your community seriously injured or killed in a transport accident. I think we ended up with at least 20 responses before, so we'll see what we get through to this one. Okay, this is surprising so far. I'm sure you guys can also see the live results as well, but unfortunately, road safety impacts many people in our lives. I myself would be in the yes, I have category. Growing up in a regional area, it's not just one person I've personally lost, but many, and many people I speak with have the same experience. So we can see here where we were at almost 50-50. We're looking a little bit more like about a third of people have. That is still significant, so I'll give it a couple more seconds, but yeah, so we can see probably anywhere between 30 and 40% of those who are in the chat at the moment have lost someone due to road safety, and you know, that's a really significant number of lives lost in our road, unfortunately. So now that we've gone through a little bit of that introduction to why road safety is important, I'll start to go on to, thank you everyone for voting as well, that's great. I'll go on to our next slide and I'll talk about maybe what, for those who haven't experienced the loss of someone, or you're just not really engaged with the topic, why you as a young person, a young transport professional should care about this issue. As you can see from this graph in this slide here, road crashes are globally the biggest killer of young people, and that is no different from in Australia. So some research which recently actually came out from my organisation identified that young people between the ages of 16 and 24 are approximately 60% more likely to be, or more at risk of being involved in a road crash than drivers who are in older brackets, which is a really shocking statistic. And that's basically the real problem here is of the road toll every year, which ends up being around 1,200 last year, I believe. But young people in our age category actually make up or are overrepresented in that number of deaths. Prior to 2015, there was a little bit of progress made where the percentage of young people decreased from the sort of low 30s to around 20%. But over the last 5 years, you can see via that green line that the percentage of that road toll for young people has really stagnated at about 24-25%, unfortunately. So we are really at risk of that being the cause of premature death in our age category. And that is exactly what the Global Youth Coalition wants to try and attack. And we do that through basically creating like a really informal membership structure with people around the world, young leaders around the world, guided by some key principles. And what we aim to do is create meaningful youth participation and engagement around the topic of safe mobility, which isn't usually the sexiest topic, but we try and do it in really engaging, fun, interactive ways. I'm probably not doing it justice because usually there's all sorts of live music playing at their events and that sort of thing, but it's a really unique way of bringing people into the conversation and then getting that conversation started. And the way that we really try to push outcomes in terms of reducing that road toll is through two main prongs. In the green there, you can see First, we advocate at the global level through to federal governments, organisations like the World Health Organizations, United Nations, big decision makers around the world who can help in this space. But then we also empower those local members of the Global Youth Coalition in order to take change in their local communities. We provide seed funding for initiatives which might improve road safety in their area, capacity development, toolkits, resources, that sort of thing, and help to generate partnerships with others who might be able to assist today. Some of those who are on this call as other panelists would, I think, be really critical in creating some of those partnerships. So if any of you are interested after today's presentation, I would really strongly encourage and love to connect with you on LinkedIn, but also please, if you have any kind of passion to try and help the Youth Coalition to save lives in Australia, save the lives of friends, families, loved ones for the decade to come, I strongly encourage you to go to www.claimingourspace.org and fill out just a really simple join form and join us today, and we can start getting started on this together. Thank you, Carolyn. Sorry guys, just going to go back to Carolyn.
Sorry, thank you. I'm sending Mel through now, but you're on mute now.
Oh, sorry. Hello everyone. I'm sorry for that little mute incident, but you know, technology. So I would first of all like to thank Grace for talking about the coalition and talking about the road safety initiatives that we have in place in order to help youth make roads safer for their generation and the next ones to come. So I would also like to thank the Young Transport Professionals for organizing this event. A handout to them. So before I start with the panel, I would like to invite all those participating to ask us whatever questions you may have about road safety, youth, Vision Zero, 50 by 30, and the new decade of action. You can post them in the Q&A section. It's found, if I'm not mistaken, on the lower right corner of your screens. And if you have any questions that may come up from our panelists, feel free to post them and just tell us which panelist you're referring to. So, okay, first of all, let's now jump into our panel. And I would first of all like to introduce Wayne Moon. So Wayne is the coordinator of Zero by 2050 for the Department of Transportation. So Zero 2050 is a new initiative of the European Climate Foundation that brings buildings on track to reach zero carbon by 2050. So welcome, Wayne. Can you give everyone a little wave?
G'day, that's me. Yep.
Okay, so I will proceed with the question. The question for you is about Vision Zero. So the UN has recently declared the new decade of action for road safety, as we all know. So this means that the target for 2020, which was halving the number of road-related deaths and injuries by the year 2020, was not met. So in your opinion, as someone who is passionate about Vision Zero, where do you think the biggest shortcomings came from? Where do you think we lacked when it came to reaching the target by 2020? So handing it over to you, Wayne.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, big question. Hopefully I can answer it well. The first thing that came to mind when I read that was maybe a question you can answer in your minds while I work through the answer is, if there's four words called why, what, how and who, just for the moment, just pick which one of those do you think is the most important. So why, what, how and who in relation to not meeting that target, or how to meet a target like that. And I'll focus on one of those words. So perhaps if you pick one of those words, I'll get into which one is the most important. So the why is pretty obvious. Obviously, those targets are very ethical and needed. So that's fantastic. The what is, I suppose, the target. So that's pretty clear, and it's good to set targets. So that's quite a contemporary and well thought out target. The how and the who are the critical ones, and the how is the most critical one. So my reflection on that would be, it's fine to set targets, but how do you meet those targets is the critical thing. And instead of asking or answering the question as to what the shortcomings were, I'll answer it in the sense of how we're thinking about us achieving zero and meeting our targets, which is the same difference, but rather than perhaps seeing it as a criticism, I'll put it in a positive context to explain how we're trying to do it and meet similar targets on our journey to zero by 2050. So we used a method of what's called backcasting, and that's no more than just visualizing the future. And in that Sweden conference, someone coined the phrase, which I like even better, is you start with the end. So that's really quite powerful. But how do you do that? So contrary to a lot of data that we gather today, and with full respect to what Alex and Rob will present, we use the data in a different context. So we are using a process where we visualize, we break up the trauma problem into different categories. And for example, we might look at car occupants or cyclists or the different road user modes, if you like. Then we look at those, we break it down further as to where the crashes would occur and ask ourselves, what would be the combination of the safe system pillars by 2050 that will reduce that trauma to zero? So that's starting with the end. And some of those solutions are not that complex. We have sorted a few out, and some of them I don't think the solutions for at the moment. So there's really polar opposites between, yes, we can do that. We're really confident, we've modeled it, we've validated it, no problems at all. If we stick to our targets and do what we need to do, we could achieve similar targets to what wasn't achieved. So the how is the missing link, I suppose. And I've had the good fortune to work with colleagues that are quite astute. Dr. Johan Strandroff and Rob here, Bruce Corbin and others who fortunately were given the space or the privilege to just think about solve these problems. And that's pretty rare in any utility that I've worked in before. So fortunately we had a couple of years to think about this stuff. And from there we did achieve and work out some solutions that will give us zero by 2050. Now, what's really crucial there is to use all of those pillars. The first key one is vehicle technology, and using those attributes in that will give us a combination with the right speed, the right geometric design and the right behaviour, some answers to solve those crash pools that Rob's all over and Alex is probably all over. So we'll use those crash pools to test our future design scenarios. What I'm stressing there is that they're an integrated package. It's not just a geometric design that an engineer might produce, or it's not just, say, a speed limit that someone might think about's useful, or it's not just the car. And most people think about a fully automated car. It's not that. It's the combinations of all those things together that when you do it well can lead to a solution. And you can validate and check that. And when you've got that right, then you can come back to your investments and your planning. And ideally, that would have supported that first decade of action to say, if we stick on the course of these targets and these transformations, we call it, then we know that that'll affect the trauma. And if we get it right, we can meet those targets. So summarising that, it's starting with the end. The other little thing to do with that is it's not so much tracking the trauma, it's tracking how we transform the system. And if we transform the system well, it'll transform the trauma well. So often we think in our circle there's too much focus on the trauma. There should be more focus on the system asset, the combination of the pillars and getting that changing, which will affect what we call the lagging indicator, which is the trauma indicator. So it's too easy to get drawn into the complexities of the trauma, but we can really use those well to calibrate and test and validate what our future solutions will look like. And to do that, probably wrapping this up, I call it a new form of data. So we need the crash data that I'm sure Alex and Rob will talk about, but the new form of data that I like is an asset data or a system design data. And often that's really hard to get. And we've used some really smart spatial people, GIS people, to help us do that. And that's been the key to map the future scenarios. And when you get them right, you can check them against the data pools that Rob and Alex use. There'll always be a little bit left over, which we call the residual. And then we can focus on what we might need to do to solve that. And if we get to, say, 90% 95%. That's pretty cool. So in short, instead of saying why they didn't achieve it, I've said how we will achieve it. It's sort of the same difference, but it gives you a bit of an insight to how we're thinking about achieving those targets.
Okay, so thank you very much, Wayne, for that very insightful answer. I really like the idea of starting from the end. So that way we have a clear understanding of what it is we need to do once we have our goals clear cut. So I think Wayne's part about the importance of data is a really nice introduction to Alex. So our next panelist is Alex Harold. Alex is the Senior Insights Officer for the Department of Transportation. And based on Wayne's answer, Alex deals a lot with data. So hi, Alex. Glad to have you on this panel. Thank you so much for joining us.
How's it going,
And the question, yeah. So the question will relate to road safety data. And viewing things through your role as a road safety insights analyst, what is the current road safety data telling us about the progress in the road safety field? And do you think the data we have now can help us improve road safety incomes in the future?
Yeah, so like with what Wayne said, that's a very difficult question to answer. I guess I'll start by giving a little bit of background first. So where I sit in the Insights and Evaluation team is part of the Safer Roads program, where among other things, our team is tasked with conducting various short, interim and long-term evaluations on the infrastructure program, which started in 2016. So of these types of evaluation, long-term evaluation is the only form that's really considered statistically significant. But the downside with this is it usually takes years worth of collection and a rigid framework to produce. So as a result, there's been an ever-increasing need to understand performance and trends while we're waiting to conduct this long-term evaluation. So that's where we come into the short-term and interim evaluation. It allows us to begin looking at various crash trends that are occurring on our road network before these long-term evaluations are available. We're currently creating various dynamic software and BI tools to enable much more, 1, efficient, 2, consistent, and 3, accurate reporting in these areas, where once really high technical knowledge was required to extract and decipher some of these trends. These tools are helping us enable a wider audience to really understand the impact of some of these road safety areas. And that really shows us how much of a key role data is playing in road safety moving forwards. So we're in a stage now where we're really starting to see some of the preliminary evidence of the impact of a lot of recent road safety initiatives. And I expect that over time, as a greater amount of after data becomes available, we'll continue to see variations in crash rates that'll help us determine essentially which treatments are effective. And I should be clear here, when I'm talking about, I primarily involve dealing with infrastructure treatments, but as we all know, there's so many more variables at play influencing these road trauma trends, from improvement in vehicle safety ratings, the deployment of new technologies which will assist in, and protect road users. So the environment we live and work in is changing. We collect and create more data every single day. And in order to maximize our capacity to impact road trauma, what we need to do is constantly gather all the learnings, insights, and evaluation and findings, and really inject that into multiple stages of the development cycle across all areas of road safety. So I really see this as being one of the most critical elements in creating, really effective investment plans that will really yield much better results as we move forwards. It really is the more you put in, the more you get out. And I'll just finish off by saying that I strongly believe that as we progress towards, the 2030 and the 2050 goals, data really will be that key driver that's going to enable a lot of this high impact targeted investment in order to save lives on the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. I really liked how you put in how important data is in terms of the infrastructure aspect, because we know that infrastructure is often, because it's a very long-term thing, infrastructure. And when you look at it, you need to have very solid data in order to make sure that the infrastructure we have is what you should call takes care of the people, the road users, especially when we're talking about transport and mobility. So thank you. So talking about infrastructure, our next panelist is Rob McInerney. So Rob is the Chief Executive Officer of the International Road Assessment Program, or IRAP. And welcome, Rob. Thank you for being with us today. So playing off of what Alex just discussed with us when it comes to infrastructure and data, IRAP plays a major role in determining whether roads are safe for road users through assessment, recommendation, and action, so that roads are upgraded to 3 stars or higher. So Rob, the question for you is if you're able to explain a little bit more about why it's important to evaluate road infrastructure and how this fits into the safe systems approach.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mel, and hello everyone. It's great to be with you today. Look, this is a really interesting discussion because, I mean, one question I would pose to all of you as young transport professionals is, do you know how safe your last transport project was that you were involved in? And unfortunately, and generally the answer is no. And coming back to Alex's part there about, like, are we measuring at the point of decision making? And in reality, in many cases, we are not. And to give you a feeling in terms of IRAP's work, we have active partnerships in over 100 countries worldwide now. And that includes the star ratings for pedestrians, the star ratings for cyclists, star ratings for motorcyclists, and the star ratings for vehicle occupants. And just as an indication of the roads we have built for humanity at the moment, 88% of the roads we have assessed globally are only 1 or 2 star for pedestrians. And the level of deaths and injury on a 1-star road is twice as much as it is on a 2-star road. And if we can get to 3 star, we halve it again, 4 and 5 star, halving it again and approaching 0. So coming back to your question about safe system is, well, what we see in very simple language is Vision Zero and safe system is when we have 5-star users in 5-star vehicles on 5-star roads. And obviously the speeds for all of those elements that actually bring that together. So if we can create that environment, that's fantastic. As Wayne and Alex have said, like there's all sorts of different things going on when it comes to road safety. So one of our assumptions might very well be, and I'm happy to make it for myself, is I make mistakes. I've sometimes found myself on the wrong side of the white line. I just didn't have a truck coming the other way at the time and I'm still alive. But coming back to Grace's question is I've had friends who haven't been so lucky. Like we have a level of death and injury that's actually built into our road system because of the way it's been designed. And so the work of IRAP, by being able to provide this very simple metric to understand how safe road infrastructure is designed to actually change the discussion at the planning level, at the design level, at the construction level, as the road is opened, and even as you are trying to maintain road networks. And because we've got these star ratings for each individual road user, we can measure a road might be safe or relatively safe for cars, but horrible for pedestrians. That's what we find in so many parts of the world. They build a 4-lane road through a village and say it's a great progress for mobility. It's not. And so some of the opportunities that we bring in this safe system context is, let's picture that you're involved in a TOD development, the transit orientated development. We build this great rail system, integrated transport, and we probably leave behind a 1-star journey for pedestrians to get there. That doesn't have to be the case. We've got an example in Shanghai where they've actually built 5-star connections for pedestrians and cyclists for the 1K radius around these transit stops and transit orientated developments. We can do that on every road project, whether it's one of your strip shopping centre, urban renewals, whether it's a major highway project, whether it's a residential development, is now we can measure road safety performance. You can understand what it is you're building. So what I'd love to see across all road projects and transport projects is you know exactly what star rating you're about to leave behind for the next 20 years. And you also know how many deaths and injuries as well. Make the decisions based on those life and death decisions. That will help us make big progress to Safe System and Vision Zero. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. That's a really nice. Teaser about what the Safe Systems approach is. It's recognizing that people make mistakes and people don't have to adjust. The system has to adjust, and that's what IRAP is doing, helping us, helping organizations adjust so that it takes care of the people. Just a fun fact: our organization, Yours Youth for Road Safety, is partnering with IRAP and is training young leaders to help measure help measure roads, and then work on recommendations so that it can be turned into 3-star roads or higher. So thank you very much, Rob. So for our last panelist, last but not least, you've met her earlier as she presented the coalition to everyone. We have Grace Willems. Grace is a transport planning and infrastructure advisor for the Royal Automobile Club of Queensland, so RACQ. And she is also a youth advisory board member for the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety. So hello, Grace. Nice to have you. So the question for you is, in your role for RACQ, you lobby and connect with the government to bring the projects and initiatives of your club that has over 1.7 million members to the government. So in these engagements, you gather the ideas and opinions of those in your network and your community. So the question now is, how important are members in the community when it comes to furthering the conversation for road safety?
Thanks, Mal. Yeah, really great question, and it follows on really nicely. And I can actually see already in the chat there's been a question from Chris around more so the user behaviour or the driver behaviour, which is always a critical component in these discussions. And it touches nicely on what Rob said about having safe 5-star drivers on 5-star roads in 5-star vehicles. So 5-star vehicles being like our ANCAP safety rating system, obviously, and IRAP playing a role in identifying those 5-star roads. So yeah, I'll talk about that 5-star also driver piece there. And funnily enough, when Wayne asked those sort of who, where, why, what, how sort of questions, even though the how is obviously so critical, and it's usually the piece that is missed because it tends to take, in terms of strategic planning, it takes a lot of technical detail to identify all those critical path steps. And often we don't see that level of commitment from government, unfortunately. But what I immediately went to as being the most important, and that's probably because I work for RACQ, which is a member-owned organisation, was the who. We always focus on the person, our members, the community, anyone we're interacting with. And infrastructure is really, really critical because if, you know, any human, as Rob said, we all make mistakes. If the infrastructure is designed so that if we make a mistake, it can reduce the severity or likelihood and risk of having a fatal or serious crash, then that's great. But I always find when I work in policy and any other projects that the hardest thing to do is to really create that behaviour change. That's what always takes the longest. I also work in automated vehicle policy projects, and it's not always how fast the technology or the infrastructure and everything can get there. It's how long it takes to actually change what is normal in society. When we talk about user behaviours and sort of road safety, what's frequently mentioned in road safety campaigns are those fatal 5. So speeding, intoxication, seatbelts, fatigue, distraction. Those are all the primary contributors to road fatalities. And in order to make regulations and policies and expectations in our communities which help people to make the right choice when they're faced with those sort of minute driving decisions and risks, it's really about recognising that the power to change road safety outcomes really can be in the hands of Australian road users. But unfortunately, what we don't do often enough is engage with them. Many of us grow up hearing about a life lost on the road regularly, and we start to accept that as being normal, and we become a little bit deaf to it. We become a little bit numb to the feeling of knowing that pain of loss. But what we really need to do, and the most critical part, I think, of those components that's often missed, is we do need to open that dialogue with the community and start conversations. It's a simple matter of explaining, you know, it might take you 90 seconds longer to get home if we reduce the speed limit by 10 k's, or you might not be able to get back to your friend on that text message immediately like you want to. But all of these small changes have massive differences and improvements that can result in road safety and fatal and serious injury outcomes if we start to have those conversations. So really, I think that the community is always going to be the missing piece until we really start to focus more on the who and not just the how and incorporate that so that we can make these changes and prevent unnecessary deaths on our roads, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Grace. If you're done, I think that ties everything together really nicely. So everyone who's watching, our panelists gave us a really wide scope of what it means, what road safety means in terms of infrastructure, roads, community members, data, and everything else that has come up during this discussion. I would like to come back to what Alex said about data being important. So we are seeing now what the earlier road safety initiatives have had on different projects when it comes to saving lives on the road and ensuring sustainable mobility. So I think I would just like to invite everyone to keep doing what they're doing and keep pushing for safer roads and sustainable mobility in their communities and their regions. And if you want, you can connect with us. We have our websites here. I think Caroline is posting it. If not, we can post it later. Join the Young Transport Professionals or the Global Youth Coalition. So I would like to thank our panelists for answering the questions we've already had. And we're having some really interesting questions from our audiences. So if you guys are ready, we can continue by engaging with our participants. So the first one comes from Alex's discussion, and anyone here can answer among the panelists if you want. So the question is, do you anticipate placing any onus on the public, or are the solutions or systems based on building solutions making human behavior irrelevant? Everything is open. Anyone who wants to answer can just jump in.
I'm tempted to jump in there, Alex, unless you want to lead.
Nah, take it away.
I think, okay, Wayne.
Yeah.
Giving it to you.
Yeah, look, very, very normal culture to blame the human. It's very hard to then look at it the other way and say, and fundamental safe system does this. And if you look at any of the Swedish really core concepts of this, it's yes, humans are making mistakes out there, and we all do, and we will continue to do that for thousands of years. There's no real changing that in us. It's an evolutionary thing that's so inherent. So the challenge for us in the system, or managing the system, designing the system, is to concede that that's still going to occur. And obviously there's some extreme behaviours that we all socially don't accept. I mean, clearly we kick when we hear and see what's occurring, but our job's to say, well, that's what humans do. How do we then accommodate that with a system that will forgive that behaviour up to a degree? And we have a line where we call it extreme behaviour, and a line below which, you know, we call it routine performance errors, and that catches most of the trauma. The high profile ones are usually fatals, but in the scheme of serious injuries and fatalities, serious injuries, you might get 5,000 a year in Victoria, and Rob's all over those numbers, and we might get 250 in fatalities. In terms of mass sample size, a lot of those were just routine performance errors, not the ones that we're drawn to think that's just terrible behaviour. So we're looking to look through a lens that says, well, you know, if Rob just did drift off that centre line there, occasionally that doesn't work out so well. How do we forgive that? That's the type of thing that when we look at human error, that's the style of human error that should be forgiven fairly easily. The other extreme behaviour is very difficult, no doubt at all. But there's lots of routine errors that if someone just drifted through a stop sign a little bit, and it ends up in the worst case, you know, there's got to be solutions for that. So I just distinguish between the two types of human error and the responsibilities that I see in the system as designing it to forgive them. Not necessarily easy, but I just wanted to add that perspective of how at least me and some colleagues look at human error.
So thank you very much, Rob. I completely agree with that. We are in fact just human, and we need a system that adjusts to our needs. But we have to bear in mind also that the system is made out of humans, and for it to work, we need to work together continuously so that we can continue saving lives on the road. And we just need to understand, I feel, what we all need as people, and just work around that together. So thank you very much, Wayne. Alex, did you want to share an answer with the question?
That was quite similar to what I was going to say. Obviously, the safe system approach is along those lines. It is a very difficult thing to tackle of human error. Thankfully, we're living in an age where we will start getting, more technologies growing to help assist in some of these cases, as well as the infrastructure. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult area to challenge. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, as Wayne said, with the some of the cultural behavioural stuff, I guess, that is, as Grace pointed out earlier, there's time to educate and change some of the cultural views on stuff, which will help us limit some of those areas as well. Yeah, that's just what I've got to add on to Wayne.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think that's really nice. It also sums it up, just reiterating the importance of considering the errors and the flaws we have as people, which is perfectly normal. So we have another question here. This one is addressed for Rob. So Rob, this question, it says, how does IRAP take into account factors like degree of trauma of pedestrians in the story?
Sorry, Mel, I muted you.
Oh, sorry about that. So just a reiteration, Rob. The question is, how does IRAP take into account factors like degree of trauma of pedestrians in the star rating system?
Yeah, so as part of our pedestrian star rating, we take into account all of the different road features that impact both the likelihood of a pedestrian crash, but also the severity outcome. So, for example, and actually very recently, we've been doing some really interesting work with the TAC in Victoria. So they've got all of the injury claim outcomes for pedestrians. And to give you an idea of one of those outs is severe brain injury is one of the largest cost items for pedestrian crashes on one-star roads, around about $140 million of costs from severe brain injury alone for pedestrians on one-star roads. On 4- and 5-star roads, that maximum sort of total claim cost for pedestrians is down around $1 million. So sort of less than 1% of that total cost. But also the actual, the individual claim costs are about 10% of the value on a one-star road, on a 5-star road compared to a 1-star road. So we definitely take into account that level of trauma, whether it's severe brain injury, whether it's quadriplegia, spinal injuries, limb fractures, and how that is impacted by both speed and all of the road design features that can impact likelihood or severity. So all of that's built into the models.
Thank you very much, Rob. I feel like that's very interesting. I mean, each road has, the star rating depends on how it is, how it treats pedestrians, how it treats people who ride motorcycles, how it treats people who ride bicycles, and how it treats private drivers or public drivers. And what was explained was that each star road, the moment it increases a star, it helps save more lives. So I think it's something that we need to look more into. So thank you very much, Rob. And I think I will. We have this question for Grace. So Grace, what do you think is the biggest road safety related challenge when it comes to that were created during the global pandemic?
Thanks, Mel. That's That's a really challenging question to ask, and I can see actually someone else in the chat has asked me a quick question, so I'll try and cover off on both briefly. A little bit of research that we did, at least for Queensland, was basically on changing travel behaviour, and what we found is generally more people are getting into cars and moving away from things like public transport, which, you know, people, more vehicles on the road, greater volume does increase risk in terms of those road incidents. Just higher volumes, that's in and of itself a factor in increasing that risk. But the other aspect there is another kind of change we saw was quite a drastic increase in active transport. Now that is absolutely fantastic in and of itself for sustainable mobility, but what we've seen in a lot of locations is people who may be inexperienced in navigating the road environment are getting out a lot more, and as a vulnerable road user, riding on roads as a cyclist and things. And with the combined increase in traffic from less people using public transport and potentially increasing their road-based journeys, and then inexperienced active transport users, that just has the potential to create more conflict. So that's where we really need to start saying we need to create a safe space for these different users. One of the ideas that's been put up and already adopted in many cities are things like pop-up cycle lanes. That at least adds a level of segregation, but it's just important to make sure that we don't introduce that infrastructure without going through the proper safety checks. Like Rob said, do you know how safe your last project was? If we don't correctly implement these even temporary solutions, we may end up creating more safety issues than what would be there previously. So I've heard of instances where pop-up cycle lanes all of a sudden end and go back into large volume traffic flows with complex intersections, and that is not a good situation for road safety, especially for people who are just starting to ride themselves. Our organisation personally, we try and focus on more so the long term, so trial like a short term pop up with appropriate safety mechanisms, but make sure that that's going to be put into a permanent structure where all the safety has been assessed over the long term. I'll just quickly touch on a question here in the chat, and Mal, you're probably great to help me answer this as well, as you've been on the Global Youth Coalition a lot longer than I have. How do we work with other organisations like IRAP and Department of Transport? Honestly, in Australia, we're very new, we're growing. A lot of our membership is based overseas. So again, I really encourage you to join, because we're trying to get the fuel in the fire over here so that we can start to make those more Australian-based partnerships. We have them overseas with the World Health Organization, various United Nations parties, and yeah, as Mal mentioned earlier, we have already partnered with IRAP on many projects. I can let Rob touch on that a little bit more if you'd like, but it's once you get these level of experience from these different organisations, and we can step in to provide that more resource-based and local support and development for any skills you might need, and maybe seed funding for projects, that's when we can really start to try and get things done, not even at the state level, but more even at local council level, things of that nature. So if you join, as I said, please come to us with ideas and initiatives that you'd like to try and kick off here in Australia, because we're looking for ways to make those tangible outcomes happen. Rob, did you want to have any addition to that partnership arrangement?
Yeah, sure, Ken. Yeah, Grace. So we're working together with the youth around the world as part of our Star Rating for Schools program, and so that's basically applying the pedestrian star rating using a really interactive app where the kids can get involved at the school, and obviously some of the youth leaders can be involved as well. And you can either adopt a school as an organisation, or you can adopt a school as an individual, and go and work with them and star rate the school environment. And ideally, I mean, I'd like my kids to have a 5-star journey to school, and I think most parents would. And so I think we've got a great opportunity to do that. And just to give you a sense of scale, we're about to start a partnership project in Peru with the Inter-American Development Bank and the local partners there, so the Automobile Club and and some of the Global Youth Coalition partners to assess and upgrade more than 2,000 schools as one big program. And if you think of COVID stimulus plans and the $2 billion put out by the federal government, what happens if we were to focus that on giving every kid a 5-star journey to school across Australia? It would be a fantastic legacy of safety for our kids to look back at the bad parts of COVID and see that there was some amazing things we could achieve. So there's some really unique opportunities there to think big, but I mean, at the end of the day, we'll get this done one school at a time, and the Youth Coalition's been a great partner with us all around the world to make that happen.
Thank you, Rob and Grace. So I would just like to touch a little bit on what both of them said about the COVID-19 pandemic, how it is a tragic, tragic thing that's happened in our history. But at the same time, it has exposed some very gaping holes in the transport system. And instead of looking at this as something very problematic, we should take this upon ourselves as a challenge on how to address these things. Going back to what Wayne said about thinking of things in terms of the end and how we will get to that end. It would be really nice to have all these things that's happened in consideration before we start acting, so that everything is more tangible, everything is more effective, and everything is more efficient. And I would just like to add continuously on what they said about the Global Youth Coalition. So how do we partner with different organizations? Coming from the communications side of the coalition, I would say that we engage with the members so that they involve youth in more meaningful participation. So Rob talked about the Star Ratings program. We have members from the coalition who have attended that program. And what's really interesting is that they are really learning about how you measure the quality of roads. And the best thing about this project, about what the coalition is doing, is that they are teaching other young people about these skills, qualities, and knowledge. In that way, the chain of information passes from one young people to another, and then we hopefully feel that it bleeds throughout the community, so that the youth movement for road safety continues to increase. So if you're interested in learning more about us, because there's really a lot, you can just connect with us through our social media and follow us on our pages, or maybe check out our site. So thank you, guys. And we don't have a lot of time left. So our panelists have been really great, sharing with us these really nice insights based on their fields and their experiences. And I would just like to thank everyone here watching in behalf of the Young Transport Professionals and the Global Youth Coalition. So before we end, I would like to just throw this question to all of our panelists, just really quickly. What do you think are the main actions that we can take now to achieve the target of having road-related deaths and injuries by the year 2030? So this goes out to all our panelists. So you can just jump in if you have an answer.
I'll go first. I was last and I'll go first. And I'll just kind of reiterate what I was saying earlier, where I think the community is really critical, because it ties into everything else. If you start to engage with your local community, even as a member of the Youth Coalition or not, you make them aware of the problem, you make them angry or passionate about wanting to fix the problem. And if you can get your local community behind a cause when it comes to election cycles and budgets, that's when politicians start to listen. And as I think Alex was saying, if you get increased funding in road safety, then you can really start to deliver more of those programs like Rob was talking about, with the improvements for school safety, and the ones Wayne was talking about, where you do targeted road safety treatments for really high risk areas for a particular type of injury or crash. And I think that young people particularly, we really have a unique opportunity here, because as Mal was saying, we bring a positive energy and an approach that I've found personally can really re-engage people around us who might have been stuck in their ways of thinking previously. And as Mel said, that's exactly what the Global Youth Coalition aims to do. We aim to empower the youth at the local level to start to create and affect change within their local communities and within their jobs.
Yep, I'll just add a little bit to that if I can. I fully agree there that the more profile that any coalition, any group can provide to the politicians to support funding in road safety is really a good part of the chemistry, and without it, the funding probably goes elsewhere. So that's certainly really critical. And one of the unfortunate things about our situation is the trauma happens quietly, if you like. There's one over here and one over there, and it's spread out over a year. It's not as high profile as, say, a big airline crash where there's lots of focus and this can't happen again. There's really a strong contrast between that and what happens in road safety. So having some continuous platforms to remind government about that is really helpful. The other part to the answer is we need to still have the how. What are the tangible ways that we can actually do this? And they're not necessarily easy to evolve, but without them, it's quite hard to get there. So my 20 cents worth there, if you like.
I'll add to that if I can. So continuing on with the investment trend, more recently, a lot of governments and organisations have committed, large amounts of investment in this area, which is fantastic. But the truth is, we can't just invest once and then stop. It has to be continual investment, and then this will help us, start getting towards the far end of this curve. So, and then again, further to everyone else's statements, at the end of the day, it's all of us who are responsible for putting people in charge that are committed to changing this cause. And additionally on that as well, I think, as we touched on it, education and changing cultural views will be a big part as well in curbing some long-term trends, because not all events are preventable, but there is the continuous education of road users with key safety messages that will reduce the number of some of the crashes that occur. And the best part about that is anyone can share this message and reach far greater audiences than just one person or a small group alone. Yeah.
Excellent. And if I wrap up, one of the questions was about Victoria's road network. Just so you know, 23,000 kilometres of star ratings have been assessed in Victoria, and in 2015 there was around 39% of the travel was at 3-star or better. But there's been a lot of investment since doing some great things across the whole SHRIP program. So just there. Coming back to the question, what's the second decade of action need for us to make a real difference? Number one is understand the injury burden. 450,000 Australians will be killed or injured in a road crash over the next decade. That's the number of new cases over the decade using the COVID language. That's outrageous. We can't let that happen, and it's happening on the roads and the transport systems that we're designing and maintaining. And so that brings me to the second point, which is, as transport professionals, understand that every decision and every project you are working on has life and death and injury implications with it. Where is the train station located? What are you doing about the facilities leading up? Do you put in a barrier or don't you? Where is the crossing point? Every one of those decisions you're making, don't just be fooled by doing it in accordance with the standards. Understand truly whether it's going to leave behind a legacy of death and injury in that community. Because as engineers and transport professionals, we really have an ethics around do no harm. The third one is really about, let's be transparent about each new investment we make. Like Alex was saying, we can't wait for a 5-year trend to tell us we've left behind death and injury. Let's use the before and after star rating. Let's star rate every design before it's built. Sign off, just as you would a bridge design. Or I started my career as a structural engineer. There is no way I would have designed a building without a balcony rail, but we can design a 10-metre drop on a road without a barrier. Why? Something's not quite right. And then I'd finish with get serious on speed and what role that has to play, and get serious on funding. Too many transport professionals pride themselves on bringing in the project under budget rather than fighting for the extra dollars needed to save a life. If we do that on a scale that matters, we will halve road deaths and injuries by 2030, I'm sure.
Wow, thank you so much to our panelists. Those were really insightful, really profound answers about what we can do to achieve 50 by 30. And I feel like my biggest takeaway that I think it's really nice because it comes from these really different perspectives and how everyone can play a role. It can work for individuals, it can work for organizations, it can work for young professionals or professionals who have already been in the field for a while, which is also really good. And I would just like to, before we part ways, I would just like to ask the participants about what they themselves could do in order to help meet 50 by 30. So they can write it down on the comments below, since you've already heard from our wonderful panel. And I would just like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Grace, for joining us and for sharing these really incredible answers with us. And to wrap up, I would like to hand over to our Caroline, so she can end the session for us.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks again, everyone, for attending today's event. Just like to thank our panelists again and the Global Youth Coalition for Road Safety for collaborating with us. Just like to say, if you want to stay connected with young transport professionals or the Global Youth Coalition, feel free to contact us on the details provided. And hopefully we'll see you again at our next event. Thank you. Bye.